They told me to step aside before I'd even said my name. That's how things started at Pinerist Shooting Club. No welcome, no questions, just a polite little shove back to where they thought I belonged. My petite frame and unassuming presence seemed at odds with the testosterone-filled atmosphere of the exclusive club. The man at the desk didn't blink when he said it either. Just glanced over my shoulder like he was expecting my husband to show up and fix the mistake. "This lane's for serious shooters," he said, in the same voice you use when telling a child the grown-ups are talking. What he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I wasn't there to watch. I wasn't lost, and I definitely wasn't going anywhere. I handed him my form with a smile sharp enough to shave. "I'm here to qualify for the advanced division." And right there his jaw tightened like someone had just handed him a problem with a ponytail. Leave a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. If you're into wild, true-feeling stories filled with twists, justice, and just the right dose of HOA drama, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Tomorrow's story, even crazier, and the surprises coming next, trust me, you do not want to miss them. He took the paper between two fingers like it had germs and read it slowly, as if hoping the ink would change its mind. "Ms. Harris, you sign up for our top-tier round. That includes military-trained Olympic track competitors." He looked at me, the way people look at a paper straw. Confused why it exists. "There's a beginner class that might be a better fit." Behind him, a few men laughed like he'd just delivered a killer punchline. One of them, a younger guy with mirrored sunglasses and a dad-funded sense of humor, muttered, "She's gonna cry by tier 2. They were so confident it was cute. I didn't flinch. I just pointed to the list of requirements on the wall. "I've met every one of those. Paid, verified, cleared. I'll take my scheduled lane now." I wasn't loud. I didn't have to be. The louder someone talks in a room like that, the less they usually know. That's the thing about these clubs. They don't run on bullets. They run on ego, tradition, and the silent agreement that certain people don't belong unless they're carrying snacks or a clipboard. And me? I'd broken the spell just by existing. Aidan Jenkins, club president, gatekeeper, and self-declared sheriff of standards, stood there like he was about to lecture me on wind speed and recoil, but instead he just forced a smile and gestured lazily. "Lane 15's open. Good luck," he said, like it was a dare and a dismissal in the same breath. I nodded once, collected my form, and walked past the wall of skepticism wearing their names like merit badges, and as I passed an old man in the corner sipping coffee, he caught sight of my dog tags peeking out from under my shirt. His brow twitched just slightly, like he recognized something they didn't. Now here's the part they didn't expect. I didn't come to Pinerist for revenge or recognition. I came because someone sent me an ad for their new next-gen targeting system, and I recognized the tech. It was mine. Stripped down, repackaged, but still mine. I built it back when I wasn't an accountant in flats, but a soldier, crawling across gravel with sand in my teeth and the weight of precision on my back. I didn't need their permission to be here. I didn't need their approval. But I did want something they didn't even know they were handing out. The chance to show them how wrong they were without saying a word. Because sometimes, the best way to prove you belong is to let someone underestimate you, then hit the bullseye so clean it echoes. So I walked to lane 15, calm and quiet, with every eye behind me convinced they were about to witness a disaster. They didn't know I'd already been through harder tests, with higher stakes and less sympathy. They didn't know I'd learned to steady my breathing in wind, heat, and chaos. All they saw was a woman out of place. What they got was a lesson in why assumptions make terrible armor. I didn't come to make noise, I came to make impact. And that starts with one thing they forgot to calculate. I'm not here to prove I can shoot. I'm here to remind them they're not the only ones who can. I didn't enlist to pull a trigger, I enlisted to build the thing that aimed it. Back then I was just a mechanical engineer with a chip on my shoulder and a talent for systems no one bothered to take seriously until they couldn't solve them. The recruiter looked confused when I asked about ballistic software, like I'd wandered into the wrong booth at a job fair. But I signed the dotted line anyway, thinking I'd spend my days inside a lab, calibrating scopes and optimizing flight curves. What I didn't know was that the military has a habit of reading between the lines, and when I aced the aptitude test, they handed me a rifle instead of a keyboard. "You ever fired one of these?" they asked. "Not yet," I said. That was the beginning of a different story, one they didn't see coming, and neither did I. The first time I touched a sniper rifle, I held it like a violin, gentle, unsure, respectful. Most of the others gripped theirs like it owed them money. We were lined up under the brutal sun, shoulder to shoulder with men who spoke in shorthand and judged you by how fast you could assemble your bolt. I was the only woman in my group, and definitely the only one who knew how to write code faster than she could clean a chamber. Major Quinn Mercer watched from the tower, quiet and unreadable. He looked like the kind of man who slept in his boots and didn't blink unless it saved time. I expected him to send me packing after day 3. Instead, he watched me line up a shot in the wind, correct for elevation, and hit a target that barely looked real through the scope. He nodded once. "Natural eye," he said. "Rare gift." I wasn't sure what stunned me more, the compliment or the fact that he meant it without an asterisk. What they didn't see during training was that I wasn't trying to be the best. I was trying not to be noticed. I wasn't loud, I didn't brag, I didn't keep score, but every time we fired, the instructors started glancing at my targets a little longer. Mercer began using my groupings as the benchmark for everyone else. By the time we hit week 6, I'd outshot half the senior trainers, developed a new recoil timing calculation that tightened mid-range accuracy, and filed 3 engineering recommendations that ended up in the official handbook. And still, guys 2 benches down would ask me where I learned to shoot like that, as if it were some party trick or luck streak. I didn't explain. It's hard to teach people that your silence is the flex. But Major Mercer? He didn't need the explanation. He just handed me a sealed envelope one morning and said, "They want you on the advanced team. You didn't just pass, you set a new range record." That was the first time I realized my target wasn't distance, it was expectation. By the time I left active duty, I had a stack of commendations, a few bruises that never fully healed, and something even more unusual, a line of code. One I'd written myself, buried inside a targeting system that would later be white-labeled, licensed, and sold to civilian contractors. Granite Hill Shooting Club was one of those proud customers, flashing their next-gen precision suite like it had fallen out of the sky. I never got the credit. That's how it works when your work wears a uniform you've outgrown, but I recognized it instantly when I saw it on their ad. Same trajectory logic. Same stabilization algorithm. They called it revolutionary. I called it mine. And that's what pulled me through their door in the first place. Not nostalgia, not revenge, just a quiet need to see who was holding the weapon. Though as I stepped up to lane 12, the present settled around me like a new uniform. I could feel the weight of their stares, half amused, half dismissive. Derek leaned against a post nearby, arms folded, eyes narrowed like he was waiting for a train wreck. One guy behind me whispered something about Instagram shooters, and someone else chuckled like that counted as analysis. I adjusted the stock, tested the trigger, and ran my thumb along the barrel like I was checking an old friend for scars. They thought I was nervous. I wasn't. I was home. And that's the part they'd never calculate. They thought my hands belonged on a calculator, not a trigger. What they didn't know was I'd written the math behind a perfect shot. And if they thought I came here to prove something, well, they were right, just not for the reasons they assumed. First tier was set at 100 yards, what they called the warm-up, though most beginners treated it like a final exam. I settled into position like I was slipping on a glove, adjusted the sight with the ease of muscle memory, and exhaled slow. The first shot landed dead center, clean as a pinhole through white paper. The second followed a half-inch beside it. The third kissed the first 2 so close the system registered it as a single, widened tear. I didn't cheer, didn't nod, just stood, handed the rifle back to the range officer, and walked to the waiting area like I'd done something as ordinary as signing a receipt. Behind me, I heard Derek chuckle, but it didn't sound confident. It sounded like the laugh you let out when you realized the punchline might be on you. That's when I knew. Their certainty was starting to crack. Second tier up the ante, 200 yards with a simulated crosswind built into the environment. It messes with you. The breeze feels subtle on your cheek, but the bullet listens to a different voice entirely. This is where the average club shooter starts pulling left, jerking right, adjusting too late. I took my time, just 3 breaths, and fired. The grouping was tight enough to fit under a quarter. The guy running the score sheet gave me a double take, then looked toward Calvin like he was waiting for permission to react. Derek, standing arms crossed in the gallery, muttered, $10 says she doesn't make the finals. The man next to him took the bet before realizing she was me and not a random hopeful. Too late. The second shot hadn't even cooled before I made it through to Tier 3. There's a special kind of justice in a $10 loss. It doesn't ruin you, it just stings enough to stay in your wallet's memory. Tier 3 is where the real separation happens. The moving targets slide and pivot at erratic intervals, and you've got to predict where they'll be before they know it themselves. It's not about reflex, it's about rhythm. Most shooters rush this part. I didn't. I waited, tracked, and pulled the trigger like I was turning a page in a book I already knew by heart. Each target dropped with the clean finality of a period at the end of a sentence. 1, 2, 3. No wasted movement, no second chances needed. The gallery behind me had gone quiet, eerily quiet. I could feel the absence of sound. The same guys who had chuckled 20 minutes ago were now watching like they'd stumbled into a live broadcast of something they weren't qualified to comment on. It wasn't fear in their silence, it was dawning respect disguised as confusion. Somewhere behind the main range line, I caught a glimpse of a familiar figure, Quinn Mercer, leaning against the far wall, arms folded, coffee in hand. His presence wasn't announced, but I knew it was no accident. He'd seen the flyer too, probably the same one I had. He watched without fanfare, didn't speak, didn't blink. But I knew that face, that expression. It was the same one he wore the first time I outshot our instructors in the desert, and he had to pretend he wasn't impressed. He didn't clap, but he smiled, a tiny shift in the corner of his mouth that said, "This is going to get interesting." And he was right. As I packed up and turned to leave the lane, I passed Calvin, who looked like he'd bitten down on a lemon with a name tag. He gave a curt nod. That was all. No congratulations, no commentary, just a small acknowledgement that I hadn't tripped on the line and embarrassed myself for their entertainment. Derek, on the other hand, avoided eye contact altogether. Funny how quickly mockery turns mute when precision enters the chat. I didn't need their praise. Their silence was enough. Because in a room built on noise and legacy, my silence wasn't surrender, it was aim. And now that I'd landed dead center, they were finally starting to listen. Even if they didn't know it yet. The only thing worse than losing control is watching someone earn it. And Calvin Reeves? He wasn't about to let that happen without a fight. So instead of congratulating me like a decent human being, he pulled me aside with a grin that smelled like gasoline and said, "We just installed a brand new digital range. Top-tier gear, completely objective. Want to give the members a real show?" I knew what he was doing. This wasn't an invitation. It was a setup with fancy lighting, public stage, unfamiliar equipment, an audience trained to doubt me. A perfect trap if you think your opponent's only weapon is a trigger finger. But the poor man forgot one detail. That state-of-the-art targeting system he just installed? I helped design it 5 years ago, in a lab where coffee was rationed and secrets were currency. He was trying to rig a race in a car I built while I watched from the passenger seat. He gave me the specs like he was handing me my own obituary. 5 shots, 800 yards, full environmental simulation, nothing subjective, he said with a wink that should have come with an asterisk. The system logs everything, wind drift, barrel pressure, trigger control, no more debate, just data. He led the way like a ringmaster, and I followed, silent as ever. The new range was slick. Digital overlays, real-time diagnostics, expensive-looking enough to impress the kind of people who confuse price tags with performance. I ran my hand along the side of the console and felt the faint hum of a system that was almost right but not quite. One look at the calibration feed and I caught the first red flag. Wind settings were 10% higher than the actual airflow. Nothing huge, just enough to make a bullet drift off target, if the shooter trusted the display. Then I checked the scope alignment. Off by half a degree, same with the pressure sensors. Delayed by milliseconds, barely visible, but deadly for accuracy. He expected me to question it, to point it out, maybe even to back out, but instead I smiled. "Let's begin," I said. They handed me the club's rifle, clean and polished, but slightly misaligned. On purpose, I adjusted it quickly, recalibrating by feel while pretending not to notice. The room got quiet. Everyone wanted to see the rookie choke on real tech. They didn't know this wasn't real tech to me. This was memory foam. I lay prone, eyes steady, fingers still. I didn't trust the readouts. I trusted the wind in my cheek, the rhythm in my breath, and the equations in my blood. Shot 1 hit clean, so did 2 and 3. By the 4th, the system started lagging, trying to process data it wasn't designed to handle. By the 5th, it spit out a warning. Precision exceeds system threshold. They built the system to catch liars. They didn't build it to handle the truth. Calvin tried not to blink, tried not to look rattled, but I saw the shift in his stance, that lean-back posture of a man whose plan just caught fire in slow motion. He cleared his throat and stepped up. "Impressive," he muttered. "Let's see how it handles my shot." And just like that, the technician at the console hit a few keys and, surprise, surprise, the wind speed settings reset. The scope alignment clicked back to perfect. The delay vanished like it had never existed. The whole thing was suddenly fair. Funny how that works when you're shooting for the home team. Calvin fired his 5 rounds with focus and form. To his credit, they were good shots, competent, confident. One even came close to center. But none were perfect. None made the machine stutter, and none could erase what had already been recorded. The display blinked with final scores. My grouping, tighter than textbook. His, wide enough to park a truck between. He stared at the screen like it owed him an apology. The crowd, quiet at first, began whispering. Not the kind of whisper you get from gossip. The kind you get when people realize they've misread the script. Someone near the back murmured, "Didn't she say she was an analyst?" Another replied, "Yeah, but did you see that cluster?" No, I could have explained it right then. Told them how the software worked, how the system had been rigged, how I corrected mid-shot, like I'd done it in war zones. But I didn't. I just smiled, nodded at the monitor, and walked past Calvin like I was late for something far more important, because deep down I knew what he was really feeling. He tried to rig a race in a car I'd built blindfolded. And he still came in second. I figured Calvin would stew quietly, lick his bruised ego, and let it go. But no, men like him don't just lose, they investigate. So it didn't surprise me when I was called to the judges' table 15 minutes later, where Calvin stood flanked by 2 board members and a tech who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. "We've uncovered a concern," Calvin said, the smug back in his voice like it never left. Our technician found some irregularities in the system's calibration history, specifically embedded author signatures in the architecture. I waited. "One of the names listed," he continued, pausing dramatically like this was courtroom television, "was yours." The tech cleared his throat and added, almost apologetically, "It was buried in the codebase, looks like part of the original dev team that built the algorithm we now use." I raised an eyebrow. That wasn't a concern, that was a compliment with stage lighting. Calvin leaned in. "That's a material conflict, Miss Blake. You failed to disclose your experience with this technology. That alone could justify disqualification." His hands were on the table like he was holding back the weight of justice. What he didn't realize was, I'd read the club bylaws before I ever stepped foot on that range. I tapped the laminated rule sheet posted on the sidewall. "The disclosure requirement," I said calmly, "only refers to formal competitive experience, not classified R&D work done under federal contract." One of the board members blinked. "Classified?" I nodded. "That's why you didn't find it on LinkedIn." The silence that followed had weight. Calvin opened his mouth again, but Quinn Mercer beat him to it. He stepped forward from the gallery and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "She didn't just shoot better than your system. She helped build it." That was the moment the room turned. Before, they saw me as a skilled newcomer. Now, I was something else. Proof that their assumptions had a price. Quinn went on, calm and matter-of-fact. "I was there when she joined the program. She redefined how we measured wind correction and shot timing. Her work changed our entire spec sheet. You're all shooting on tech that has her fingerprints in the wiring." Derek, standing off to the side, looked like someone had knocked the air out of him with a sentence. One of the judges mumbled, "Well, that changes things." Calvin, visibly cornered, blurted out his Hail Mary. "If she's that good, then she shouldn't have any problem taking one last shot. 1,000 yards, verified equipment, no tech tricks, just skill." It was a challenge with teeth, but the kind of teeth that fall out when you apply pressure. I agreed without hesitation. "One shot each, you go first." The range was reconfigured to its max distance, 1,000 yards. Not a casual shot, not even for seasoned shooters. This was where wind mattered, posture mattered, ego got crushed. The equipment was checked 3 times, independent calibration, fresh ammo, fresh targets. Calvin stepped up, breathing harder than the wind blowing across the flags. He aimed, focused, squeezed. The bullet landed a decent shot, 2 inches off center, good enough to earn nods from the gallery. He stood back like he just secured moral ground. "Your turn," he said. I could hear the satisfaction curling behind his words. He really thought that shot was a wall I couldn't scale, and to his credit, for most people, it would be. But here's the thing. I don't shoot to impress. I shoot to erase doubt. I took my place, adjusted the stock, slowed my breath, and let the weight of the moment stretch, just long enough to matter. Then I fired. The sound echoed once, short and clean. The display didn't react right away, just blinked. Then blinked again. Then a bright red message appeared across the screen. Measurement limits exceeded. The crowd gasped. A few leaned closer to see the readout. Quinn Mercer gave a low chuckle that only I heard. "Dead center," he said. "System couldn't even score it." And that was it. The shot so clean, it broke the machine designed to judge it. Calvin stared at the screen like he was looking at a ghost. He wasn't. He was looking at the woman he'd tried to erase with a technicality. Turns out, I was the technicality. And the reason the system qualified in the first place was me. 6 months after that final shot, Granite Hill doesn't look the same, and that's not just metaphor. The place breathes differently now. The silence that used to hang in the air like a closed door, gone, replaced by the rhythm of new voices, sharper questions, and the occasional sound of someone discovering they're better than they thought. I didn't plan on staying. I figured I'd win, walk away, and leave them to chew on their lesson. But then the board offered me a position I couldn't ignore. Technical director. Apparently, when you outshoot the range and outthink the software, people start asking what else you can do. So now I spend my days repairing the very systems I helped design, training the members they used to overlook, and occasionally pausing mid-session just to appreciate how far things have come. Turns out, transformation doesn't always need a revolution. Sometimes it just needs someone to stay. Membership's up by 30%, give or take, and not just in headcount, in heart. We've got veterans coming in who haven't picked up a rifle since deployment, young women who used to think this place wasn't for them, and a few retirees who said they just wanted to try it once, but now show up 3 times a week. The funny part? Most of the new blood doesn't even know how the change started. They just feel it. The old rules, the unspoken ones about who gets to belong, aren't hanging over the lanes anymore. They've been replaced with something lighter, And every time I see someone square their shoulders, take a breath, and land their first clean shot, I think, that's it. That's the moment. That's the whole point. And what about Calvin Reeves? Well, pride doesn't break easily, but it can bend. To his credit, he didn't disappear or dig in deeper. Instead, he stepped back. These days, he serves as club historian and liaison tittles that sound like window dressing, but he wears them with grace. He gives range tours to guests, shares stories about the old days with just enough distance to let the new ones shine, and believe it or not, he listens now, really listens. His wife, Eleanor, who once told me she felt like a stranger every time she walked in the front door, now co-leads our First Shot program for new members. The first time she guided someone through a stance adjustment, she lit up like she'd just remembered her own strength. I didn't teach her that, I just made sure she had space to remember it. As for Derek, well, humility looks different on him. It fits better than arrogance ever did. One afternoon after a training session, he approached me by the lockers, hands in his pockets, like a teenager about to admit to breaking a window. "I owe you an apology," he said. No eye roll, no sarcasm, just the words. "I didn't see you clearly back then. I see you now." I nodded. Didn't let him off the hook, but didn't hang him with it either. Growth doesn't need an audience. Sometimes it just needs a chance. And watching Derek coach a new shooter last week with patience, actual patience, I realized he wasn't pretending, he was learning. That's all most of us really want, a shot to grow without being branded by our first impression. The ribbon-cutting ceremony for our new training wing brought in more people than the club had seen in years. Cameras, community leaders, members standing shoulder to shoulder, many of them meeting for the first time. I stood at the podium, fingers wrapped around a simple pair of scissors, and looked out at a room that didn't just tolerate change, it celebrated it. "I didn't come here to win," I told them. "I came here to make space." And turns out, those are the same shot. The applause that followed wasn't loud, it was deep, like the kind of sound people make when they realize they've been part of something bigger than themselves. And in that moment, I wasn't just the woman who hit center mass. I was the one who redrew the map, so others could aim without permission. Now, when people ask what changed Granite Hill, they expect some dramatic tale of rebellion, but the truth is quieter than that. It started with a shot, yes, but not at anyone. At a target, with precision, with patience, with just enough stubborn belief to break the pattern. Excellence doesn't shout, it just shows up, takes the shot, and rewrites the rules quietly. And if that's all I'm remembered for here, that's more than enough, because now the club isn't just a place for sharpshooters, it's a place for people ready to stop stepping aside and start stepping up. And maybe that's the real bullseye, isn't it? That no matter how many times the world tries to put you in the waiting room, there comes a day when you stop asking for permission and just walk into the arena. I didn't change Granite Hill by raising my voice. I changed it by raising the standard. And if there's one thing I hope this story sticks with you, it's this. You don't have to shout to make history. You just have to show up, stay sharp, and take your shot like it belongs to you, because it does. If you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or told to step aside, you know what this story's really about. It's not just about Morgan Blake or a shooting range. It's about value, about how quiet confidence can beat loud assumptions, about how experience, skill, and integrity don't need applause to be powerful. Morgan didn't just win a contest. She dismantled a gatekeeping system by being excellent where it mattered most, on her own terms. It's a lesson worth carrying whether you're holding a rifle, a resume, or just your head up high. If this story hit home for you, if you felt that quiet fire of justice, skill, and standing your ground, go ahead and leave a comment below and tell us where you felt underestimated but showed up anyway. We'd love to hear your story. And if you want more tales packed with truth, twists, and that sweet taste of earned respect, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss the next episode. Because next time, we've got another story that'll make you sit up, smile, and say, "Ha, they didn't see it coming."